The third word I want to talk about is create. I'm deeply passionate about this one. The world needs creators. 20 years ago, when I graduated, knowledge work was the big thing. ICT was exploding. Everyone was talking about the knowledge era. If you think about the history of humanity, you can broadly think about the agricultural age, the industrial age, and so on and so on. And then 2 decades ago, we were squarely in the middle of the knowledge or information age. When I started my career at McKinsey in 2006, I was a junior associate. The best and brightest MBA graduates from the top universities across the world joined McKinsey. And a lot of the work that we did as young associates was analysis and synthesis. We waded through information. We learned the art and science of finding information that was hard to find, deriving insights out of them, and supporting organizations to reach decisions and actions based on those insights. That, that work is still relevant, of course, and someone has got to do it. But that is not where the value lies in the years to come. The true value add will come from those who have the ability to create. Creativity is the act of turning new and imaginative ideas into reality. It is the ability to perceive the world in new ways, to find hidden patterns, to make connections between seemingly unrelated things, and to generate solutions to hard problems. Before you tell me or yourself that you're not creative, let me assure you that the world is not divided into those who can create and those who cannot create. I believe anyone can create. It is not easy to create, but it certainly can be done. And in 20 years from now, if you want to be successful, it is important that you cultivate your creativity. Over the last many years, I've also learned that we are not left-brained or right-brained. We all have both sides of our brains. We may have lived in a past where you could either be logical and analytical, or you could be creative and intuitive. But in the future that awaits us, if you want to be a leader, you had better learn how to use both your left and your right brains together. Everyone has a different starting point when it comes to creativity, and therefore there is no one answer on how to be creative. I'll share with you my journey. About 8 or so years ago, I started getting curious about the different ways that human beings think. I started observing that people think in different ways, and I also started realizing that I thought in one specific way. It was largely effective for me. I could get to solutions to problems I wanted to solve, and I was rather efficient about it. But it was still one way. I was an analytical thinker. I was an engineer by training. I'm drawn naturally to numbers. I like facts and data. But I didn't want to be a person who could only think in one particular way. I set about to explore how I could train myself to think in multiple ways. I started learning design thinking. People who design products take a fundamentally different approach to how an engineer solves a problem. It was fascinating for me. It was different from what I had been exposed to. Creatives think in a different way. Artists, writers, choreographers, anyone who makes something out of nothing, approaches the world in a different way than an engineer or a designer. I decided to explore that, so I joined a writing class. The first courses were awkward. While my classmates, most of them literature majors, could write and critique beautifully, I felt like I was a 5-year-old who found herself in a high school calculus class. But I stuck with it. I took the writing course term after term, proceeding from one level to the other. No matter what pressing issues I had, I made time to join my writing group every Tuesday evening. I took in sometimes the harsh feedback that I received, and I used that to improve the way I think, create, and write. And over the course of 7 years, yes, it was not a fast process. It took 7 years. I evolved the way I think, which is ultimately the way you see the world around you. So when I published my book earlier this year, it might have come as a surprise to many who had always seen me as a businesswoman. But it was the result of a deliberately developed skill, and in this case, the power to create. And I urge you to find your own way to hone that skill, the skill to create. Let me give you a practical tip. I do a lot of interviews for various roles in my teams. The job requirements are different, but there are a few things I always look for in candidates that is the same across all roles. One of the questions I usually ask is, give me an example of a creative solution that you have come up with. It doesn't matter what the context or the problem is, the candidate is free to choose. But what I look for is evidence that when they are confronted with a new challenge, they have the ability to come up with a solution that no one else had thought of before. So, as you start your MBA journey, I suggest you keep this in mind. When you graduate, if someone were to ask you that question, what would your answer be? And if there is no ready answer to that question now, how do you go about creating an example that would make anyone who's recruiting say, wow, that is a brilliant solution to a difficult problem? Exactly the kind of person we need in our organization.